The auction house in Santa Fe smelled of old paper and desperation. Daniel Mackenzie sat in the back row, his scarred hands folded across his lap, watching wealthy developers bid on parcels of New Mexico scrubland like they were trading baseball cards. He'd driven 3 hours from his trailer in Alamogordo for this, not because he had money, but because he had nothing left to lose. At 52, Daniel looked older. 26 years in the army had carved lines into his face that no amount of rest could smooth. 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan, and a medical discharge after an IED turned his right leg into a patchwork of metal pins and scar tissue. His pension covered rent and beans, barely. Lot 17, the auctioneer announced, his voice nasal and bored. Mission San Miguel de las Cruces. 18 acres, structure condemned, no utilities, sold as is. A photograph flashed on the screen. Crumbling adobe walls, a collapsed bell tower, desert scrub choking what might have once been a courtyard. The mission had been abandoned since the 1890s, when the last priest died under circumstances the historical records called unclear. Nobody wanted it. The state had seized it for unpaid taxes 3 times. Opening bid $5,000. Silence. Daniel raised his card. 5,000. A few heads turned. Someone snickered. 5,000 once, twice. The auctioneer's gavel cracked. Sold to bidder 43. In the parking lot afterward, a real estate agent in a silver SUV rolled down her window. Her smile was practiced, sharp. You know that place is worthless, right? Foundation's shot, you can't build on it. Historical protection laws. Can't tear it down either. You just bought yourself a liability. Daniel leaned on his cane, meeting her eyes. Then why do you care? Her smile thinned. She drove off without answering. The mission sat 30 miles south of Socorro, accessible only by a rutted dirt road that hadn't seen maintenance since the Cold War. Daniel's pickup coughed dust as he approached, the August sun turning the dashboard into a griddle. Through the shimmering heat, the ruins emerged like a broken tooth. Walls the color of dried blood, timber beams jutting from collapsed ceilings, empty window frames staring at nothing. He parked in the shade of a dead cottonwood and stepped out. The silence was absolute. No birds, no wind. Just the tick of his cooling engine and the crunch of his boots on caliche soil. The main structure had been a church once. He could see that in the bones, the remains of a nave, a sanctuary, what might have been living quarters for the priests. The bell tower leaned at a dangerous angle, held up by nothing but stubbornness and physics. Inside, the roof had caved in decades ago, leaving the interior open to the sky. Vigas, thick pine beams, lay scattered like matchsticks. Adobe bricks had melted back into the earth. Daniel walked the perimeter slowly, testing the ground with his cane. His leg ached, it always did. But something about this place felt different from the photographs. Quieter, heavier. Behind the church he found the cemetery. 23 wooden crosses, most rotted to splinters. A few headstones remained, their Spanish inscriptions worn smooth by wind and time. One was newer, relatively speaking, granite, not wood. He knelt, brushing away dried needles. Padre Miguel Sandoval, 1844, 1891. Guardián de la Fe, guardian of the faith. Daniel stood, knees popping. There was a story here. Priests didn't die guarding faith from weather and neglect. As the sun dropped toward the Magdalena Mountains, he made camp in his truck bed. Sleeping bag, Coleman stove, a gallon of water. He'd spent worse nights in worse places. At least nobody was shooting at him. But sleep didn't come easy. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the bell tower's shadow stretching across the courtyard, pointing toward something just beyond the cemetery's eastern edge. Morning came with the smell of creosote and dust. Daniel made instant coffee, ate a protein bar, and began documenting the property. The county required a structural assessment before he could do anything, even camp here legally. He photographed walls, measured doorways, noted where the foundation had cracked. In the sacristy, the small room where priests once prepared for mass, he found remnants of their lives, a broken pottery jug, rusted nails, the burnt corner of what might have been a Bible, and beneath a collapsed shelf, something that made him pause. A leather journal wrapped in oilcloth. He lifted it carefully. The oilcloth crumbled in his hands, but the journal beneath had survived. The cover was cracked, the pages brittle, but the ink, faded brown, was still legible. Spanish, written in a tight, anxious hand. Daniel's Spanish was functional, learned in border towns and supply depots. He could read enough. The first entry was dated March 3rd, 1891. They have come again. 3 men on horseback, their faces hidden. They demand we leave. They say this land holds nothing of value, that we waste our time here. But Father Miguel knows the truth. He has shown me what lies beneath the eastern wall. I am afraid. Daniel sat back on his heels, heart thumping. He flipped through more pages. The entries grew shorter, more frantic. References to the chamber, to what the Spanish hid, to men who threatened violence if the priests didn't abandon the mission. The final entry was dated August 14th, 1891. Father Miguel is dead. They made it look like fever, but I saw the bruises on his throat. I am the last. I will not leave. I will not tell them. God forgive me, I will take this secret to my grave. The page ended there. Daniel closed the journal carefully and stood. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from recognition. He'd seen this before, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. The ugly arithmetic of greed. When men wanted something badly enough, witnesses became problems. Priests became obstacles. He walked outside and looked east, past the cemetery, toward where the courtyard's eastern wall had once stood. Now it was just rubble and sand. But walls didn't collapse randomly, and men didn't kill priests over nothing. Daniel went to his truck, retrieved a shovel from the bed, and began to dig. Chapter 2. The Weight Beneath by Noon. Daniel had excavated a trench 3 feet deep along what remained of the eastern wall's foundation. Sweat soaked through his shirt. His bad legs screamed with every thrust of the shovel, but he'd learned patience in the army, how to endure discomfort, how to ignore the voice that said quit. 2 feet down, the shovel struck something that wasn't dirt. Stone. He knelt, brushing away soil with his hands. Flat stones fitted together without mortar. Flagstones. Beneath 3 feet of accumulated earth and debris, someone had laid a floor. Daniel widened the trench, working carefully now. The flagstones extended east, beyond the wall's foundation, into what should have been empty desert. 6 feet, 10 feet, 15. Then the stones stopped, not crumbled, not broken. Just stopped, at a clean edge like a doorway. He cleared more dirt, moving faster now despite the heat. The edge of the stones formed a rectangle, roughly 4 feet by 6 feet, and at one corner, barely visible, an iron ring set into the stone. A hatch. Daniel sat back, breathing hard. His mouth was dry, his hands were bleeding from broken blisters, but he couldn't stop smiling. He gripped the iron ring and pulled. Nothing. He braced his good leg against the stone and pulled harder. The hatch groaned, rust flaking from ancient hinges. Then, with a sound like breaking bones, it lifted. Darkness yawned beneath, and the smell that rose from below, cool mineral untouched by sun for over a century, made the hair on Daniel's neck stand up. He had rope in the truck, climbing gear from a half-remembered attempt at hiking the Sandias, a headlamp. He rigged a simple anchor around the cottonwood's trunk and dropped the rope into the opening. The shaft descended 12 feet into solid rock, hand-carved. The walls showed chisel marks, precise and deliberate. At the bottom, his headlamp revealed a chamber. Daniel descended slowly, testing each foothold. His leg hated him, but when his boots touched the chamber floor and he swept the light across the space, every ache disappeared. The chamber was 20 feet across, with a vaulted ceiling supported by wooden beams. The walls were plastered and painted, faded now but still visible. Saints, angels, the Virgin of Guadalupe, and along the far wall, stacked floor to ceiling in neat rows, wooden crates, dozens of them. Daniel approached slowly, hardly breathing. The crates were old, 18th century, maybe older, bound with iron straps, marked with symbols he didn't recognize, Spanish colonial stamps. He chose one at random and pried at the lid with his knife. The wood was dry, brittle. It split easily. Inside, wrapped in rotted canvas, lay silver bars. Not coins, not jewelry, raw silver, cast in ingots stamped with the double-headed eagle of the Spanish crown. Each bar weighed maybe 40 pounds. Daniel counted 12 bars in the first crate. He opened another crate, more silver, another, gold coins, tarnished black but unmistakable. Another, religious artifacts, chalices, candlesticks, a monstrance crusted with gems. Daniel stood in the center of the chamber, light sweeping across a fortune that shouldn't exist. The Spanish had mined silver throughout New Mexico, but they'd also lost it, to Apache raids, to revolution, to the chaos of empire's collapse. Missions had been hideouts, waypoints, vaults for wealth in transit. This mission had been a vault, and Father Miguel had died protecting it. Daniel's hands were shaking again, not from excitement, from the weight of understanding. This wasn't just treasure, this was blood, history written in silver and silence. And if the journal was right, someone had known it was here. Someone had killed to keep it hidden. Someone who might still be watching. He climbed out of the chamber as the sun touched the mountains. His leg was numb, his hands were raw, but his mind was racing. The journal said, 3 men on horseback. In 1891, that could have been anyone, ranchers, miners, outlaws. But the way they'd killed Father Miguel, quietly, made it look like fever, suggested something else. People with power, people with something to lose if the mission's secret became public. Daniel sealed the hatch, covered it with dirt and brush, and returned to his truck. He sat in the cab as darkness fell, eating cold beans from a can, thinking. If he reported this to the state, they'd seize it. Historical artifact laws. He'd get nothing. Maybe a citation in some dusty museum placard. If he tried to sell it privately, he'd end up in prison. Possession of stolen colonial treasure was a federal crime. But if he said nothing... His phone buzzed. Signal was weak out here, but enough for texts. Unknown number. You should leave, that place isn't safe. Daniel stared at the screen. Then he typed back, "Who is this?" No response. He waited 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. He turned off the phone, locked the truck doors, and lay back in the sleeping bag with his service pistol under his pillow. Sleep came in pieces, broken by dreams of empty windows and shadows shaped like men. Chapter 3. The Watchers. Daniel woke to the sound of an engine. Not his truck. Something bigger. Diesel. He sat up, hand finding the pistol automatically. Dawn light filtered through the cottonwoods branches, turning the desert pink and gold. And rolling up the dirt road, throwing a plume of dust, came a black Ford F-250 with tinted windows. It stopped 50 yards from the mission. The engine idled. Nobody got out. Daniel climbed from his truck bed, holstering the pistol at the small of his back. His leg was stiff, protesting. He grabbed his cane and walked toward the Ford, keeping his movements slow and visible. The driver's window lowered. The man inside wore a white Stetson and aviator sunglasses. Late 60s, maybe 70. A face like carved mesquite, hard, weathered, used to command. "You're trespassing," the man said. Daniel stopped 10 feet away. "I own this land, bought it at auction 3 days ago." "You made a mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake." The old man removed his sunglasses. His eyes were pale blue, the color of winter sky. "My name is Harlan Voss. My family has ranched this county for 5 generations. That mission sits on an old easement. Access rights my grandfather negotiated with the church in 1920. You can't block that access." "I'm not blocking anything. There's no fence. Yet." Daniel shifted his weight, leaning on the cane. "What are you really worried about, Mr. Voss?" Harlan's jaw tightened. "This land has history. Bad history. People died here. You'd be smart to sell it back to me and walk away." "How much?" $10,000. Double what you paid." Daniel smiled without warmth. "And if I say no?" "Then you'll learn what every other fool who tried to develop this place learned. The foundation's poison, the well's dry. The access road washes out every monsoon. You'll bleed money and time until you're begging someone to take it off your hands." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." They stared at each other across the desert silence. Finally, Harlan put his sunglasses back on and raised the window. The Ford reversed, turned, and rumbled back down the road. Daniel watched until the dust settled. Then he pulled out his phone and took a photograph of the tire tracks in the dirt. He spent the day in Socorro's public library, a squat building that smelled like carpet cleaner and old coffee. The librarian, a woman in her 70s with a nameplate reading Mrs. Chen, pointed him toward the historical archives without asking questions. Daniel requested everything on Mission San Miguel de las Cruces. The files were thin, a folder of newspaper clippings, mostly from the 1880s and 1890s, references to declining attendance, aging priests, rumors of illness. Then, in August 1891, a brief notice. Father Miguel Sandoval, age 47, died of fever at Mission San Miguel. He was the last resident priest. The mission will be abandoned. No investigation, no questions, just fever. Daniel dug deeper. Land records, property transfers. In 1892, the mission and its 18 acres were sold at tax auction to a man named Thomas Voss, Harlan's grandfather. For 130 years, the Voss family had owned the land, until 3 months ago when the current owner, Harlan's son, according to the records, had failed to pay property taxes and the state seized it. Daniel leaned back in his chair, processing. The Voss family had owned the mission for over a century. They'd never developed it, never sold it, just held it, kept it empty, kept people away, because they knew what was underneath, and now a stranger had bought it out from under them. That evening, Daniel returned to the mission with supplies, a battery-powered floodlight, a digital camera, a notebook. If he was going to do this, he needed documentation, evidence, something that couldn't be denied. He uncovered the hatch and descended into the chamber. This time he worked methodically, photographing every crate, every artifact, every mark on the walls. He used the notebook to catalogue what he found. Crate 1, 12 silver ingots, Spanish colonial stamps, approx. 40 lbs each. Crate 2, gold coins, various denominations, estimated 200+ pieces. Crate 3, religious items, chalices, monstrance, candlesticks, 37 crates in total. He calculated rough values based on metal prices, conservative estimates. Even accounting for historical restrictions and legal complications, the chamber held millions of dollars in raw materials alone. As historical artifacts, the value was incalculable. But the most important discovery came when he examined the chamber's walls more closely. Beneath the painted saints, carved into the plaster in small, precise letters, was an inscription. Here lies the tithe of Santa Fe, hidden by order of Obispo Salazar, September 1769, that it might fund the church's mission when the crown's shadow lifts. Let only the faithful reveal it. Daniel photographed the inscription from 3 angles. This wasn't stolen treasure. It was church property legally hidden during a time when Spanish colonial authorities were seizing religious wealth. The priests hadn't been criminals. They'd been custodians, which meant Father Miguel hadn't died protecting treasure. He died protecting the church's right to reclaim its own property, and the Voss family had killed him for it. Daniel climbed out of the chamber as stars appeared overhead. He was covered in dust, exhausted, but his mind was sharp. He knew what he had to do, not for the money, not even for justice, but because Father Miguel had died alone, protecting a secret no one would ever know. That ended now. Chapter 4. The Reckoning. Daniel drove to Albuquerque the next morning, 3 hours up I-25, truck shaking at 65, radio playing old country songs he didn't listen to. His leg throbbed, his hands ached, but his jaw was set. The Archdiocese of Santa Fe occupied a modest building near Old Town. Adobe-style, red tile roof, a courtyard with a fountain. Daniel parked in the visitor lot and walked inside, cane clicking on Saltillo tile. The receptionist looked up from her desk. "Can I help you?" "I need to speak with someone about historical church property." "Do you have an appointment?" "No, ma'am, but I think you'll want to make time for this." He opened his notebook and showed her a photograph of the inscription. Her eyes widened. She picked up the phone. Father Martin Cordero was younger than Daniel expected, maybe 40, with steel-rimmed glasses and the calm manner of someone who'd heard every confession. He listened without interrupting, while Daniel explained everything. The auction, the journal, the chamber, the Voss family. When Daniel finished, Father Cordero leaned back in his chair. "You understand this is an extraordinary claim." "Yes, Father." "And you're prepared to provide evidence?" Daniel slid a USB drive across the desk. Photographs, documentation, GPS coordinates, everything. Father Cordero inserted the drive into his computer and spent 20 minutes reviewing the files. His expression never changed, but his fingers tightened on the mouse. Finally, he closed the laptop. "Mr. Mackenzie, if this is authentic, and I believe it is, and you've discovered one of the lost tithes of the colonial period. There are records of Bishop Salazar ordering several missions to hide church property during the 1760s, when the Crown was appropriating religious wealth. Most were lost during the Apache Wars and the American conquest. We've searched for them for decades. What happens now? We contact the State Historic Preservation Office. We arrange for proper excavation and authentication. And we acknowledge your discovery publicly." He paused. "I should tell you, under church law and federal antiquities regulations, you have no legal claim to the treasure itself, but there are provisions for finder's compensation. The church would negotiate a reward, likely substantial." Daniel shook his head. "I don't want a reward." Father Cordero blinked. "I'm sorry. I want you to tell the truth about Father Miguel, about how he died protecting this and nobody cared enough to ask why." Daniel's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "I want his name cleared. I want the record corrected. That's all." The priest studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I think that can be arranged." The news broke 4 days later. Lost colonial treasure discovered beneath New Mexico mission. The story spread fast. Local news, then national, then international. Archaeologists from UNM arrived with ground-penetrating radar and excavation permits. The Archdiocese sent historians. The State Historic Preservation Office sent lawyers, and Daniel sat in his truck watching them work, drinking gas station coffee. Harlan Voss showed up on the second day. He didn't get out of his Ford, just sat there, engine running, staring at the mission, at the archaeologists, at the news vans. Daniel walked over and tapped on the window. Harlan lowered it. His face was grey, old. "You should have taken my offer," he said quietly. "Your grandfather killed Father Miguel. You can't prove that." "I don't need to." Daniel gestured at the activity around them. "The truth's already out. Your family sat on church property for 130 years. Let priests die for it. Let a mission rot into the ground. People are going to ask why." Harlan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "My grandfather did what he thought was right. That silver could have started a war. Apache, Mexican, American. Everyone would have fought over it. Keeping it hidden kept people safe. He could have told the church. And let them squander it? Let the government take it?" Harlan shook his head. "You don't understand this land, son. Out here the only law is what you can hold. My grandfather held this, kept it safe. That should mean something." Daniel leaned on his cane, looking at the old rancher. And despite everything, he felt something like pity. "It means he was scared," Daniel said, "and he passed that fear down to you, that's all." He walked away without waiting for a response. 3 months later, Daniel stood in the mission's rebuilt courtyard. The church had funded restoration work, new roof beams, stabilized walls, a proper foundation. The chamber beneath had been excavated, documented and sealed with a steel vault door. The treasure was gone, relocated to a secure facility in Santa Fe for study and eventual museum display. But Father Miguel's grave had been restored. New granite headstone, fresh flowers, and a plaque that read, "Padre Miguel Sandoval, guardian of the faith, who gave his life protecting the church's sacred trust, his courage is finally known." Father Cordero stood beside Daniel, hands folded. "The Archdiocese wanted you to know we're establishing a scholarship in Father Miguel's name for students studying theology and history, funded by a portion of the treasure's value." Daniel nodded. "That's good. And we're offering you the position of site caretaker, salary, benefits, housing in the restored mission quarters. Someone needs to oversee the property, give tours once the museum opens. We thought you might—" "I'll take it." Father Cordero smiled. You didn't let me finish. Don't need to. Daniel looked at the mission, no longer a ruin, but a monument, a truth brought into light. This place needs someone who understands what it costs to protect. I understand that. They stood together in the afternoon sun, watching clouds build over the mountains. A monsoon was coming. The desert would bloom briefly, green and impossible, before the heat returned. But for now the air smelled like rain, and the mission's bells, restored, recast, rehung, waited to ring again. Somewhere in the earth, Father Miguel could finally rest. The Guardian's watch was over.